They think it's glamorous. They think it's cool. They think they can handle it. I fought in the most vicious, violent sport on earth, and I survived. But drugs destroyed over half my family. Jesse, my youngest son, shot himself in the mouth just 9 months after becoming a heroin addict. 2 of my other sons died with syringes stuck in their biceps. My wife, Lynn, committed suicide, feeling the pain only a mother can. Drugs killed 3 of my sons. Drugs killed my wife. I don't want that to happen to you. Together, we can fight against drugs. Together, with love, we can beat drugs.
In 93 professional fights, he was never knocked off his feet. Joe Frazier, George Foreman, and Muhammad Ali all defeated him, but none can send him down. He was a human shock absorber, a freak of nature, with Ali calling him the toughest opponent he ever faced. But life outside the ring dealt him the fiercest blows. His personal tragedies piled up. 3 sons and a wife lost to drugs and suicide, each buried one after another. He bore the weight of it all with a heart that refused to heal. Even a warrior as tough as he was couldn't elude the cruelties of fate, and the sadness he carried served as a reminder that even the strongest can be brought to their knees in grief. George Chuvalo was born on September 12, 1937, in Toronto, Canada. His name was originally spelled without the H and pronounced Chuvalo, but Chuvalo became the accepted pronunciation over time. His father came to Canada from Croatia in 1926 with no money and a right arm that could not bend at the elbow. He did pick and shovel work on the roads of Ontario before sending for his wife 10 years later. Upon her arrival, they both went to work in a meatpacking plant. "My old man was a skinner," Chuvalo said. His arm was bad, but he was a skinner, which is the toughest, dirtiest job in the world. He made $45 a week, and my mother made $20 a week, plucking chickens. Chuvalo grew up in a West Toronto neighborhood called The Junction. One writer described it as neither white-collar or blue-collar, but a dull gray for the grime and crimson for the blood of the meatpacking plants. Chuvalo described his father as a strict and abusive disciplinarian. "If I'd done something bad, he'd hit me on the fingertips with a pussy willow branch," Chuvalo said, "then hit me on the buttocks and put me on cinders, coals that had cooled off, and I would have to pray for forgiveness. I would yelp and howl like a natural-born sissy, but my sister Zora never made a sound. Zora was tougher than I ever was." His mother was the opposite of his father, a sweet woman who favored George. She worked from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., but during her break, she would run to the store, buy an orange and a bag of chips, run the half-mile to George's school, and throw the treats over the playground fence to her son. She'd kiss him on the cheek through the fence and run back to work. Chuvalo fell in love with boxing at the age of 7 after seeing pictures of fighters in magazines. He begged and pleaded for his mother to buy him a pair of boxing gloves. 2 years later, she granted his wish, and Chuvalo engaged in unsanctioned matches in a parking lot of a pasta factory called the Macaroni Field. Chuvalo weighed 198 pounds by the age of 15 and began competing on the amateur circuit. He won 18 of 19 fights, becoming the Canadian amateur heavyweight champion at the age of 18. He turned professional without any kind of promotional backing, a trial by fire which started when he competed in a Jack Dempsey heavyweight novice tournament in April of 1956. Chuvalo knocked out all 4 of his opponents in winning the event. In his next match, he was put in against South African heavyweight champion Johnny Arthur, a veteran of over 37 fights. Chuvalo pulled the upset, winning an 8-round decision. but the lack of strategic management showed when he was put in against another vastly more experienced foe in Howard King, who decisioned him over 8 rounds. Chuvalo avenged the loss a year and a half later and won the Canadian heavyweight title when he knocked out James J. Parker in 1 round. However, in October of 1958, he was on the receiving end of a boxing lesson when Pat McMurtry outpointed him over 10 rounds at Madison Square Garden. The loss discouraged Chuvalo, and he stayed out of the sport for a year. At the age of 21, he married the 15-year-old Lynn Shepard. Lynn's father gave the marriage his blessing, but her mother disapproved of both George and his occupation. The couple married in a nearby church, and Lynn had 4 boys by the time she was 21, later adding a daughter. Chuvalo returned to the ring a little over a year later, defending his Canadian heavyweight title against YVON DURELLE before suffering upset losses to Pete Rademacher and Bob Claroux. After he was disqualified in a match against Joe Erskine for headbutting, Chuvalo retired from the ring to become a used car salesman. "I was discouraged," Chuvalo said. "I was wasting my time." Chuvalo soon found the used car lot to be a far cry from the excitement of the boxing ring. He raised money to buy out of his original contract and moved to Detroit, knowing that he needed a better trainer, someone specialized in aggressive fighting styles. Theodore McWhorter took Chuvalo under his wing, and after a year and a half, he began to show improvement. Talks then began for a possible match against Muhammad Ali, then known as Cassius Clay. Ali saw Chuvalo fight and nicknamed him the Washerwoman, an insulting reference to the awkward way Chuvalo threw his punches. Before his match with Tony ALONGI in Miami, Chuvalo paraded around in drag as he wore an old bonnet, a dress, and had his face made up like a clown. The pre-fight antics didn't help him against ALONGI, as he was held to a draw. 2 months later, he lost a one-sided decision to Zora Foley. His career now going backwards, Chuvalo saw the need for a manager. He signed on with Irv Ungerman, who owned the chicken processing plant where Chuvalo's parents worked. Only at the behest of Chuvalo's mother did Ungerman agree to handle him. Chuvalo's career then began showing some life as he won 4 fights in a row, which included a stoppage win over the highly regarded Doug Jones. 4 months later, Chuvalo took on the former heavyweight champion Floyd Patterson at Madison Square Garden.
That was a big right hand. He is expertly tonight. Hard body punches by Chuvalo. Chuvalo hasn't gotten many good shots in at the head yet.
Say hello to my mother and daddy there in Louisville, Kentucky. They're watching this fight.
Flashing right hand by Patterson.
I believe Chuvalo is shook. If Clark can only keep on him, he'll knock him out, I believe. Oh, he's determined. He's coming back.
Well, win or lose, Floyd will know he's been in a fight.
That's right. I believe both men will. You notice Floyd is standing there like his old self. He should move if he's not too tired.
back for a moment. When those punches start raining, he is cut around the left eye.
Floyd got tagged that time. A little shook.
First time anybody was really hurt.
That's right. He's pretty smart. Floyd is staying close to him. Floyd is tough.
Well, I don't think they come any tougher.
I don't think Floyd can take what George is taking.
Or did they? There it is. What a round that was. Chuvalo has been the aggressor, which is not to take anything from Patterson, who's fought a tremendous fight, as does Chuvalo. They're in Patterson's corner now, or were.
Floyd is really pulling out now. He's way ahead. He knows it, too. He's real confident.
There have been no knockdowns.
Beautiful. I believe he shook Chuvalo.
The fight is drawing to a close. Took a deep breath before he threw that punch. Seconds left, 30 seconds. Apparently there will be no knockout. Time is running out. It's almost over. Jack Clayton has to dive between them. Listen to the crowd.
Castellano, 7-5, favor of Patterson.
Patterson is the winner.
The other judge, Joe Armstrong, 8-4, Patterson. Winner by unanimous decision, Roy Patterson.
Patterson by unanimous the surgeon.
George, the cut on the eye, was that from a punch?
We bumped heads a few times. I don't really know what happened. If that's the case, I'm still one thing, my James. I figure if I hit the man to the body, because well, those body shots are... And, you know, most guys don't like to hit the body. I know if I get him to the body, he'll start holding. And that's when I start ripping upstairs. Because he'll be out grabbing me. Every time I start hitting him, and he'd be phoning from my arms, the referee would break us up. So that was it.
What was your style of attack? Did you try to
I try to get him to go in the body, then I could start bringing him up there when we're inside. So I know he started grabbing from my arms. When he started reaching, I know I get him a good shot to the jaw. But every time I go bang, bang, on the pull went back to the jaw, the referee would step in and bring. I think I should have hit him with a left hook or something.
Chuvalo was the aggressor throughout, scoring points with his clubbing right, but Patterson had superior craft and hand speed, winning a decision in a bout that was voted Fight of the Year. Chuvalo blamed the referee Zach Clayton for the loss, claiming that Clayton kept breaking them up on the inside. Chuvalo wanted an immediate rematch with Patterson, but instead returned to his native Toronto, defeating Journeyman before getting a shot at Ernie Terrell for the WBA heavyweight title. Terrell used a steady jab to outpoint Chuvalo. He later complained that the Canadian was a dirty fighter who headbutted him and kept trying to step on his feet. Chuvalo thought he won, and once again blamed the officials. "My hometown messed me up," Chuvalo said. "Toronto, thank you for nothing."
But the fight that really upset me the most of all was a fight in my hometown, November the 1st, 1965, with Ernie Terrell for the heavyweight title. And I know I beat Ernie Terrell, but Ernie Terrell was with the right people. When I say the right people, I don't mean the right people literally. I mean figuratively. He was with the mob, and they had too much muscle, and they scared the living daylights out of everybody involved in the fight game in this town. Basically, I mean, when I say everybody, I'm talking about, I know a couple of officials because we're scared to death. They came up and told me after the fight. I know Irving Ungerman almost had a heart attack. Anyway, I know what happened. Ernie Glickman was the front man for Tony Accardo. They were the mob. Bernie Glickman scared the hell out of everybody here. He threatened Irving. Irving told me this after the fight. He says, if Chuvalo wants to fight, you can end up in a cement box in Lake Ontario. And he says, we're going to take the business, we're going to take the chicken business away from you. You know? It's in your wife's name, but we're going to take it from her too. So Irving was like this before the fight. It scared the hell out of him.
Well, not only that.
And I know they scared a couple of the other officials. And one of them came up to me after, and they told me that he was muscled by them too. So I couldn't fight with that kind of power because of that. I didn't have the same kind of guys, you know.
Yeah.
You know, Irving had a couple of the boys in blue hanging around before the fight, but you know, what are they going to do with those guys, you know?
Yeah. But not only that, you got a uniform on, you got some responsibility. The guys coming in from New York, the big guys from New York.
Well, they were from Chicago, actually.
Chicago. Maybe worse.
2 months after the defeat to Terrell, Chuvalo lost to unknown Argentinian Eduardo Carletti over 10 rounds. But this was all ignored as he was granted a shot at Muhammad Ali's WBC heavyweight crown. Ali's negotiations with Ernie Terrell were at a standstill, and his people saw money to be made in Toronto with Chuvalo, who took the fight on 17 days' notice.
Or is he?
No, he's Muhammad Ali at the time.
All right.
Actually, he was supposed to fight Ernie Terrell in New Jersey. But the American Legion was so incensed at the fact that Ali refused to go into the draft. He said he had no quarrel with the Viet Cong. He didn't want to go to Vietnam. And he said, I'm not going to go into the army. Anyway, the American Legion was so incensed that they virtually forced the fight out of the United States and into Montreal, Quebec. And for whatever reason, Terrell pulled out of the fight. When the fight was scheduled for Montreal, he pulled out of the fight. He said he had a stomach ailment problem, and he was out of the fight. On March the 12th, they phoned my manager, Ungerman, and asked if I would fight in Toronto against Muhammad Ali on the same date, March 29th, the scheduled date, 17 days notice. I asked Irving if he could talk to them about postponing at least a couple of weeks, but they wouldn't do it, and they said, either you fight or...
Nobody would do that today. No.
Not today, no.
But you're a trainer, right? I mean, you're in good shape.
I was in good
fight
shape
or no fight.
I was training all the time. Usually I take a little time off after a fight, a week or so, then right back into the gym. It was like a business.
Yeah.
And so I was in pretty good shape. And the only thing is that for a fight of that caliber, you'd like to get the proper sparring partners, and I had the proper sparring partners, but just a little more time, to work with a style like Ali's. But not that you're going to find guys who are just around the corner with a style like his, especially in those days.
Over 13,000 Canadian fans arrived to root for Chuvalo, but the only drama was when the hometown hero kept hitting Ali low and in his lower back. Chuvalo's sparring partner Hubert Hilton called these blows anywhere punches. Ali stated that the foul shots were the only ones that hurt him, and the hometown referee, Jackie Silvers, waited until the 12th round to finally warn Chuvalo. Despite the dirty tactics, Chuvalo's reputation as a determined and stubborn fighter was cemented after this performance against Ali. He never stopped coming on, Ali's trainer Angelo Dundee said. You've got to admire a man like that. Never once did Chuvalo take a step backwards, Jerry Eisenberg wrote. This is the kind of courage that is generally prized by people who hear voices, but whatever it was, Georgie boy had it. 3 months later, Chuvalo met the stubborn Oscar Bonavena. Bonavena was a mirror-like image of Chuvalo, but wisely elected to be the matador to Chuvalo's bull. He also came closest to flooring Chuvalo. In the Bonavena fight, I lost my balance and skidded back, Chuvalo said. I heard the crowd drawing in their breath in anticipation. Then it raced through my mind that if I stumbled back and went down, my record would be gone. I thought, I'm not going down. I won't let it happen, and it didn't. Chuvalo's strength and perceived indestructibility now became his distinguishing characteristic as well as his negative virtue. Seeking to rebuild, Chuvalo's manager lined up one journeyman after another, enabling him to go on a 12-fight win streak before taking on the undefeated Joe Frazier in Madison Square Garden. Old trainer Freddie Brown joined McWhorter in Chuvalo's corner, which made for some great shouting matches on how things should be done. The two trainers disagreed on how to fight Frazier. McWhorter wanted Chuvalo to let Frazier wear himself out. Brown wanted an all-out attack. Brown wanted Chuvalo to eat steak. McWhorter wanted him to eat fish. The constant yelling by Brown had Chuvalo threatening to pull out of the camp 4 days prior to the fight. But the arguing was all academic as Frazier pummeled Chuvalo, leaving his face, according to one writer, looking like a cantaloupe that had been in the sun for too long. After the loss, reporters asked Chuvalo if he would retire. Manager Irv Ungerman insisted that more lucrative days were ahead. He'll be a great opponent, Ungerman said, a rich trial horse. Chuvalo got angry at his manager's words. Don't say that, Chuvalo said. I'll never be a trial horse for anyone. Chuvalo avoided up-and-comers for the next 2 years, building up his record against marginal opposition before losing a decision to Buster Mathis. But his never-say-die attitude was finally rewarded with good fortune on December 12, 1969. Chuvalo met top contender Jerry QUARRY and looked to be on the losing end of another decision before he floored QUARRY in the 7th. QUARRY got up on one knee, thoughtlessly waiting for the count to end, and Chuvalo was awarded the knockout victory. But the significant win didn't allow Chuvalo to escape being used as a trial horse, as in August of 1970, he was brought in to face the undefeated George Foreman. Reporters called the match a slaughter, but Chuvalo remained true to form, screaming at referee Arthur McCanny after he stopped the fight, telling him that he was nuts and that Foreman was on his way to punching himself out. A decision loss to Jimmy Ellis followed, and the cry for Chuvalo's retirement rang loud in the press. Chuvalo was the picture of a totally beaten man, Bob Hughes wrote, a man unable to understand what was happening to him, a man unwilling to realize that the end finally had come, that George Chuvalo had lost his foot race with time. True to form, Chuvalo found a way to resurrect his career, scoring an impressive decision over a 38-year-old Cleveland Williams on the undercard of the Ali-Buster Mathis fight. 6 months later, the now 34-year-old Chuvalo received a long-sought-after rematch with Ali, once again losing a lopsided decision. I'd like to compliment him, Ali said after the bout. He only threw one low blow, and he is far from being washed up. Anyone who can take my best shots will be around for a while. Despite Ali's positive feedback, Chuvalo's days as a headliner were now over. He fought club fighters in Canada for another year and a half before retiring in 1973. His name was bandied about as a possible opponent for up-and-comers, but Chuvalo resisted the urge to return until 1977, when at the age of 39, he launched a brief comeback, once again defeating club fighters in his native Toronto before hanging up the gloves for good in 1978.
I like hitting people. I don't mean on the street, obviously, thank God, you know, but I mean in there. I mean, do you, well, you must like it, right? How many
I
years?
like winning. I don't know if I necessarily just
okay.
like hurting somebody for the sake of hurting somebody,
right.
But I like winning, and if it takes hurting the other guy or beating the other guy, but I don't think of it. I never think about the fact that I'm going to inflict pain on the other guy in the sense I'm going to beat this guy up, but I'm going to take great enjoyment out of beating him up or inflicting pain. I want to win. The big kick for me is to win. That's the big kick.
So the camaraderie is there. I mean, it's not that you hate these guys. These are people that you work with.
Yeah, once the bell is over, I mean, it's really a false emotion in the sense that all of a sudden you and I sign for the fight. Right now, I like you. You like me.
Okay.
I think we both like each other, right? But once we sign to fight each other, now I look at you through different eyes. Yeah, I look at you through different eyes. And I'll try to do as much damage to you in the fight, and you try to inflict as much damage as you can during the course of 10, 12, 15 rounds. But once the fight is over, it all disappears.
Years into his retirement, his in-the-ring beatings paled in comparison to the suffering he endured outside of it. It started with his son Jesse. Jesse had a rough time from the beginning of his life, as when he was 18 months old, he bit on an exposed electric cord which deadened the nerve endings on the right side of his face. Jesse faced a decade of plastic surgery and skin grafts, which meant his childhood was filled with vicious teasing in the schoolyard. This led him to cutting a kid's face with a Coke bottle at the age of 11, and 2 years later, he stabbed the man with a pocket knife, the beginning of a long rap sheet of assault charges. After he cracked his kneecap in a motorcycle accident, he ran out of his pain medication and decided to use heroin as a replacement. By the age of 20, the drug had taken full control of his life, and he committed suicide to escape its grip.
Yeah, so there's warning, but it's like people. You have your antennas up, but sometimes you don't pick up things the way they're supposed to, because sometimes people say things and you don't heed them. But my son told me he was going to kill himself.
In those words? Or?
Yeah, just like that. 2 weeks ago, I'm going to kill myself. For what? And about as we talked about it, I didn't believe him. I had to stop it. People say things like that. You don't really believe. You don't really believe their anguish. You don't really believe their pain. Because if you're not a dope addict, you can't believe the pain, you know.
And it was a drug situation.
He was a heroin addict, and it's almost innocuous. I mean, to say like, well, he got a motorcycle accident, blew off a kneecap in effect, and he was on Demerol for a week, and after they shut him off, they just gave him Tylenol 3, and I see him at night, laying and hugging his knee. He said, "Pops, I gotta have something for my knee." All they give me is Tylenol 3. That's all it started. Anyway, he got his stuff on the street. He told me he was going to get it on the street. So I'll get stuff on the street, take care of it. I'm not going to give drugs to take care of the painkillers. Tylenol 3 won't do it. I mean, it sounds crazy, but he went out on the street and got his stuff. He got it, and then he got involved with heroin, and he just couldn't stand being an addict. There were the things they probably had to do to stay alive, to be on. I mean, I don't know what he did to. I don't know what he did to, I just know that he could have a tough time staying off it. When I say what he had to do to get it, I mean, he had whatever money he made, everything had to go into the drugs, into pursuing the drug. And he had a heart, he didn't want to live. He just didn't want to live. When you lose a kid, you grieve so, your grief is so strong that you have I know at least in my case, I had a tough time having my own grief. I had a tough time looking after my kids. I mean, it was hard for me to be a source of comfort to my sons and my daughter when I was so overcome with grief myself. So my family has been kind of devastated by the circumstance of events, and it all started from a motorcycle accident.
George Jr. and Stephen also became addicted to heroin, robbing pharmacies in the Toronto area to feed their habit. On one occasion, the brothers entered a drugstore armed with a knife and a hatchet. After the pharmacist loaded up their bag with an assortment of prescription drugs, Stephen and George ran out a back door, through a field, and jumped on a bus. Once inside, they gulped down the pills by the handful until they reached their stop and collapsed. The two were arrested, and only days after his release, George Jr. was found dead in a shady motel, his head caked in vomit with a needle sticking in his arm. Days later, Chuvalo's estranged wife Lynn wrote out a suicide note as she sat in Jesse's old bedroom. She swallowed a bottle of prescription pills and lay down on her son's bed, cradling his ashes as she passed away in her drug-induced sleep. A day after her death, Stephen was rushed to the hospital after a drug overdose, his heart brought back to life by older brother Mitch and some paramedics. Stephen was later sentenced to 2 years in prison with Chuvalo, pleading with his son to get clean. "I need you to be okay, so I'll be okay," Chuvalo told his son. Stephen decided to give up heroin, planning on touring with his father to warn people about the powerful grip the drug can have over its users. But he later became distraught over divorce proceedings brought against him, and he was found in his sister's house, slumped over a chair with an unlit cigarette in one hand and a needle stuck in his arm. "I am always in mourning," Chuvalo said. "I am not made of stone, so I cry because it feels better in a crazy way. I cry, and I do okay for not being okay." Chuvalo then spent his retirement years speaking to high school students about the dangers of drugs. "If you're ever tempted with the idea of doing drugs," Chuvalo said, "I want you to think of me and think about what drugs did to my family."